Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 35 of the BadMotoGP-Show. We had a banger of a race today at the Sachsenring in Germany, and we are here to discuss it all. So, Keelan, did you enjoy the racing? And hello and welcome.
Hello, Leo, and hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode number 35 of the Bad MotoGP podcast. We are coming to you in the aftermath of the Sachsenring, of course, Leo's home country of the beautiful Deutschland, Germany. And yes, I have to say, I really enjoyed the races, and I enjoyed the races in all classes this weekend, Leo. The action really delivered, very high octane, very intense. And as always, I'm really looking forward to getting into the nitty gritty of it. So, yeah, looking forward to getting into it.
Yes, before we start, I would like to apologize because the last couple of days have been very busy for me. I was traveling a lot, doing a lot of things, and trying to record the podcast. So I actually forgot to upload it to Spotify and all the other platforms last week. So it's only available on YouTube. So I'm sorry for this. This one will be better. I will upload it on all platforms now. And I guess I will do it tomorrow because now it's the evening and we have a lot of time to discuss. But then I would like to go to bed probably. So yeah, first of all, apologies for this because I simply forgot. And yeah, tomorrow I'll be on the road again to back to my flat, and because now I'm at my mom's place because it was more convenient. And yeah, talk about MotoGP. Let's start because this race, alongside with Jerez, was one of the best races we had this season. It's either Jerez or Germany, but those two were absolutely incredible. I thought the race in Germany was better, even though I fucking hate this track. It's just a karting track, and MotoGP is way too fast for it. But we don't have a better option here in Germany, so it is what it is. But yeah, we have to deal with it, and it delivered today. It delivered. Marc Marquez didn't race, so surprise, surprise, he injured himself. But I guess it was a surprise that he wasn't good and competitive at all. But we will get into this later. So, how did you perceive the battle between Pecco and Jorge Martin?
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. Actually, no, not very good viewing. Excellent viewing. First of all, shout out to Jorge Martin. What a weekend he had. Obviously he won the sprint race, looked phenomenal in that, and today he looked equally as phenomenal across double the distance. So, yeah, credit to Jorge Martin. He had a fantastic weekend. Looked really, really unbeatable. Pretty much during the entirety. And yeah, excellent battle with Pecco Bagnaia. Pecco had a great weekend as well. Obviously, second in the sprint race, second again today. And he looked very mature. He rode very, very well. Had a great battle with Jorge. Especially the last 5 laps were brilliant. Got very, very nail biting towards the end. And in the end, it was 6 thousandths of a second that separated them at the finish line. So that tells you how good both guys were. And both were very, very deserving of finishing where they did. Jorge was very, very calculating in his riding in order to maintain the win. Pecco made contact at the end of the second to last lap, which just knocked his potential win off. But look, that could have happened to anybody. That's not a criticism or anything. That literally could have and would have happened to anyone. But credit to both guys. It was a brilliant, brilliant race. They did themselves proud. And if you're Ducati, you must be very, very happy that both those guys had the race they did, because they were both excellent. So props to both guys.
Yeah, and I thought that watching the battle, you could see how both riders tried to outsmart the other. This was
Yes.
very, very interesting, and Jorge Martin won the battle because at the end, it looked like Pecco had a little bit more pace, but due to the nature of MotoGP in 2023 and due to the nature of the Sachsenring, it's not a particularly good place to have a lot of overtakes. And I think Jorge Martin, he positioned himself very, very well. And it sums it up perfectly when they went down the waterfall and Pecco had the outside line, which would have been the inside line for turn 12 then. And Jorge Martin just shut the door on him and he couldn't go left anymore because he would have went off track then.
Mhm.
And you could see at the image that Pecco was lifting his head a little bit up because Jorge Martin just shut the door on him. He would have overtaken him then. And this was very, very brilliant. The way he defended was good because they don't have rear view mirrors. They just do it out of experience and with their ears. They're hearing the bike from the other and anticipating where they will be. So it was very, very entertaining to watch. And I think Pecco would have won the thing if he didn't make contact there.
Yeah, I actually think I'm inclined to agree with you. When you see the 6,000ths of a second at the end of the last lap, you do have to think that if that contact's not made, Pecco has that extra 10 yards of pace, and you have to think that's enough to get him over the line if that contact isn't made. But look, I thought it was very smart from Pecco, and I thought, again, you guys have heard us speak from the beginning of the season about Pecco's immaturity and his unwillingness to take a second place or a third place. And I think what you saw today was Pecco normally, I feel he normally would make a reckless move to try and go all out for the win. And maybe he crashes both of them if that happens. In fact, probably he does. But today you saw Pecco give it his all, but you saw him okay with the second place. And that was a very good thing for Pecco. He's showing it in flashes. He's not showing it consistently enough. But what you saw today was the mature world champion version of Pecco Bagnaia, a guy who gave it his all, but who made the contact and said, okay, I've made the contact. I'll run the race, but I'll take the second place if I need to. So I think that's an excellent point to make. And I thought it was very good of him that he did that, because now he has 20 extra points to take to Assen next weekend. And he's in a very, very strong position.
Yes. What I found very interesting, that those two riders had two different approaches to the race, because Jorge Martin, he wanted to lead
Yeah.
every time. But when Pecco passed him, he was right at the tail of Pecco's bike and tried to overtake him as soon as he could. While Pecco, he was more comfortable with being second, and you saw that he was willing to give a little bit of a gap to Jorge Martin to cool his tires a little bit down and then attack again. And towards the end, to have more tire life left to attack him. So Pecco was very, very smart over the race. Unfortunately, he had this little win it or bin it moment where he touched Jorge Martin. And I felt like that Jorge actually made um, a good decision there to cut Pecco off a little bit, because Pecco was super fast out of this turn and out of the last turn, and he was a motherfucker on the brakes. You saw this on the onboards. It was incredible. I was thinking, where is this guy braking? Because they are basically having the same bike. I mean, Pecco has a little bit of a different aero package, and he was braking like 5 meters later. There were, when he was leading, an onboard view of Jorge Martin, and they were more or less side by side. And then Jorge Martin had the better line, and he hit the brakes, and Pecco just gained like a couple meters of him and still made the corner perfectly. And then there was another onboard where you saw it, I believe it was from Pecco's perspective, where you saw them braking at the same time, and Jorge Martin went slightly wide, and Pecco made the corner perfectly. He is so incredibly good on the brakes, and he's so tough to overtake. And all of Jorge Martin's speed came basically from the infield, those very fast corners there. But on the brakes is Pecco a beast.
Yeah, I mean Pecco. I mean Pecco's real game plan is being brilliant on the brakes, and again he was today. If it wasn't for Jorge Martin, Pecco would have taken this race pretty comfortably. His braking skill is just phenomenal, and I was actually reading, or as I was watching the race, I saw the Brembo stats. Obviously Brembo, the brake supplier to MotoGP, and it takes the bike breaks from something like 200 kilometers per hour to 70 kilometers per hour in 5 seconds or something like that. And this level of force that it takes to break the bike that well is unbelievable. It really is a phenomenal amount of skill, and it's a skill that Pecco Bagnaia is the master of, and it's something that serves him very, very well. Unfortunately for him today, Jorge Martin was just as good, if not better, in the brakes. He used the entry very well, especially the waterfall section, and that's really where Jorge Martin was using that time to get past Pecco on the infield and break down into the corner back up towards the finishing straight. It's something he used very, very well. Last thing I want to mention, because you made a really good point about this, Leo, and you talked about their strategies coming into the race, and I think it's something that's really worth mentioning because it's a mirror of what we've seen in the wider season. What we've seen from Jorge Martin is this restlessness and this absolute desire to lead the race, to get out in front as quickly as possible and stop Pecco from checking out. And I think this is the way to beat Pecco Bagnaia, because if Pecco gets to the front and he gets half a lap to get into his rhythm, 1 lap, 2 laps, 3 laps, all of a sudden he's 2.5 seconds ahead and you can't catch him. Whereas Jorge Martin today, when Pecco overtook him, and you made a phenomenal point, Jorge was immediately on his tail, on his rear tire, and the second the opening section, the waterfall came up, bang, he's inside him and he's away. And what we've seen is that you have to interrupt Pecco's momentum before it can get going, or Pecco will just check out. And I think this is something that Jorge did phenomenally in the sprint race and the main race today. So I just want to give Jorge Martin credit for that, because I thought he did that very, very well.
Also, the thing about Jorge Martin always was that he was very fast at the beginning of a race, but then towards the end he faded, and he made a brilliant job to preserve his rear tire. I mean, Jack Miller should take some lessons. And he was very competitive towards the end. And you saw the race, like the first 15 laps was more or less exactly like the sprint race. But then towards the end, Pecco came on a little bit stronger. But Jorge Martin did everything right, and towards the end, Pecco seemed to have a little bit more pace, but Jorge Martin was a little bit smarter than him, so he absolutely deserves it, because to even be in the position to battle Pecco in the last lap, this is an incredible achievement for somebody who is usually more prone to fading towards the end of the race. And if he can figure this out, then everybody is in danger this season.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's another good point to mention. Jorge Martin does very much have this tendency to fade the longer the race goes on, both with his tires and probably with himself as well. And his endurance and his stamina in this race was excellent. Now, I don't know if that's because the Sachsenring's a left-handed track. I don't know if that contributed to the tires being more durable or what happened. But whatever happened, Jorge Martin has found something that helps him preserve these tires a lot better. And like you said, if he can master this and get into the flow of preserving his tires better, then the rest of the grid is in real trouble, because I would argue Jorge has got the fastest outright pace of any rider on the grid. But his issue that's held him back has always been tire preservation. He's almost the inverse of Johan Zarco, who is excellent at tire preservation but has struggled with pace. You know, Jorge Martin's got the pace nailed down, but it's the preservation of the tires that's hindered him. If he can replicate today in Assen and the next race and the next race and the next race, then he will certainly be a challenger to Pecco's title. If he can get this right, then it really is trouble for the rest of the grid, because that will be very, very impossible to defeat.
Also, Jorge Martin always was a little bit prone to injury. And we had this, I believe it was nerve damage last year, where
That's right.
he underwent surgery on the arm and then came back after, I don't know, I believe it was Catalonia or something. And you saw a little bit of improvement, but he also had the GP22, and we talked about the GP22 a lot on this podcast. For example, it won its first race with Marco Bezzecchi in Argentina, and it won its first race with Marco Bezzecchi in the dry in Le Mans. It was the hybrid 21, 22 machine that Pecco used last year. So the engine was so bad that Pecco decided he doesn't want to have it, and Jack Miller followed along. But Jorge Martin was stuck with this bike, and the combination of his injury or his not 100% physical fitness and the bike where he wasn't comfortable on. I mean, I talked about it with Jack Gorst after the tests. He said Enea Bastianini jumped on the GP23 and said it's not a big difference. And Jorge Martin, coming from the 22 engine, jumped on the 23 and said it's a big difference. Everything is so much better. So we see Jorge Martin now with a better bike for his riding style. And I would love to know what exactly is the difference between those F ducts that Pecco has on the side and the ground effect fairing that Jorge Martin uses. I don't know if it's just preference or if Pramac is testing something for Ducati there or whatever it is. I don't know how it changes the feeling of the bike, the strength and weaknesses of it. I don't know, but I would love to know. And I will try to figure it out for the next podcast. So I will contact some people. And yeah, if Jorge Martin is comfortable on a bike and is healthy, he is very dangerous.
He is, and today's just one example of why he is. The Styrian Grand Prix last year that he won, he was
It was
untouchable.
the year before, it
Or,
was 2021.
sorry, you're right. Yes, the year
Last year
before.
was a little bit of a disappointing year for him because he
Yeah.
didn't win, had a couple of podiums, and had his injuries and his has struggles with the bike,
Mm.
and then this year is a lot better for him.
Yeah, but Styria, the last race he won, he looked untouchable, and
Yeah,
today he looked untouchable. And I think what we're seeing with Jorge Martin is a combination of what you've said and what we've said already. The better bike, it's suiting his riding style. The aero package being perfect for Jorge Martin based on how he rides. All the ingredients are coming together for Jorge Martin, and you are seeing a guy who is probably at the moment, alongside Marco Bezzecchi, the biggest threat to Pecco Bagnaia's title. And you're seeing that because all these elements are coming together very well on what is a truly phenomenal bike in the Pramac Ducati. So long may it continue, because I'm a big Jorge Martin guy. I like him. I think he's a phenomenal young rider. I think he's learned from the crashes. He's a much more, I don't want to say he's a much more careful rider, because he was never not a careful rider, but he's much more aware of not falling into crashes. He stays on track a lot better than he did last year. So I think if he can keep all these elements up and keep bringing them together, he could be a serious challenger, and he probably will be.
yeah. I don't know if he can challenge Pecco to Valencia for the championship, but I can see him challenging Pecco for a lot of race victories like Enea Bastianini did last year. And speaking of Enea, I'm very, very excited to see him after the summer break when he's
Yep.
100% healthy again, what he can do, because this, I don't care if they're all Ducatis, this is a matchup I want to see. And throw
Yes.
a healthy Enea Bastianini in the mix there and his late race pace, and you have a whole different ball game there. So it's incredible to think about Enea Bastianini coming back at 100% after the summer break. And I have to thank Jorge Martin personally, because after the race in his green room before the podium, he watched the replay of the finish and said "puta madre," which translates to "son of a bitch," more or less. So this is definitely a meme which will get used a lot in the future. So thank you very much, Jorge.
Yes, thank you, Jorge, for the content. We appreciate it. But yeah, on that note about Enea Bastianini, I completely agree. Pretty much every commentary team and every media outlet has been saying how excited they are for Enea Bastianini after the summer break. I mean, look, he's still getting top 10 finishes while he's recovering from injury, which is phenomenal in itself. But when you've got a fully fit Bastianini back on that bike, Oh boy, it's going to be interesting. Really, really interesting. And to be honest, I think Jorge Martin still will be there challenging. Maybe not all the way to Valencia, but I do think he's going to push Pecco. What I'm excited to see is how Pecco handles the pressure of Jorge Martin and Enea Bastianini pushing him. Is he going to be able to handle two different areas of pressure at the same time when he's trying to retain his title? Only time will tell, but I am really, really excited to see Enea Bastianini after the break.
Yeah. And you touched on something there. If Pecco can withstand the pressure, then I don't necessarily see Jorge Martin as a real threat to the title. But if Pecco continues to fuck up every couple of races, then we have a very, very interesting championship on hand. I don't see Jorge Martin as a guy who comes in and wins 5 races in a row, but I see him as a guy who's always consistently in the top 5 and grabs podiums here and there and grabs victories here and there, especially in the sprints. Those are made for him. And I think that Pecco needs to be very careful on his mistakes, because I don't think it's about what races Pecco will finish and not about what races Pecco will win. So it's not about winning 5, 6 races in a row like it was last year. It's about being consistently on the podium, and then I think he has the upper hand.
Yeah, I do, and I think that's a very good point as it pertains to Pecco Bagnaia. And the thing is with Pecco is that the greatest blessing of Ducati could be the greatest curse, because every single one of their bikes are uber competitive. There are a lot of Ducati riders who are going to have a big say in the title race this year, because they'll either be the buffer for Pecco and protect him from everybody else, or the Sharks will circle Pecco and they'll all want to have a say in it. And look, we've seen how good Luca Marini, Marco Bezzecchi have been this year. Jorge Martin has been phenomenal. Johan Zarco has been really, really good. Alex Marquez looks like a new rider. Okay, Di Antonio struggled, but I mean, you've got 7 of 8 bikes that are competing and fighting. Bastianini's been injured. After the summer break, you are going to get last year's Enea Bastianini, and that is going to be a very interesting dynamic change in this title race. Because if Bastianini is anything like he was last year, he is going to hoover up podiums and he is going to hoover up points that other riders have been picking up in his absence. So I gotta say, I'm really excited to see how it all pans out, because I think it's
Yeah.
going to be a very fun race to the finish.
I mean, at the end of the season, if it's Brad Binder who challenges for the title against Pecco, I can see the other Ducatis helping Pecco.
Mm.
Or not helping Pecco, but not disturbing Pecco in a way. But let's say at the end of the season, it's Jorge Martin versus Pecco. Nobody will give a fuck, because there's no argument from Ducati to say you should help Pecco, because at the end of the day, they are both Ducatis. And for Ducati, it should be equally as valuable if Jorge Martin or if Pecco wins it, even though it looks better if the factory guy wins it, yes. But at the end of the day, there is no real argument like there was last year.
Well, yeah, and I mean, with Ducati, I think we've seen even from last year, their number one priority is the Constructors' Championship every year. And obviously, they're going to win it this year because they got 8 bikes, it's the best bike, yada, 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 reasons we've discussed. But I think if it comes to a point where it's between Pecco and another Ducati rider, be it Bastianini, Martin, whoever it is, whether Pecco and the factory team keep the Riders' Championship or whether it's Pramac or whoever else, that is a very good thing for Ducati. And I'm going to tell you why it's a very good thing. If, say, Pramac, for example, one of their riders wins the Riders' Championship, that's vindication for Ducati that their project works so well that a satellite team has riders capable of winning the title. That makes them a better organization, not a worse one. So, yes, you're completely right. It's obviously better for the factory image wise to have the guy in the red leathers with the championship. But if it's a guy in Pramac colors or Grassini colors or Mooney VR46 colors, all it does is prove that they made the right choice in building these teams. That's a good thing as far as I'm concerned, not a negative. But either way, we'll have to see what happens because we don't know how it's going to end. We've only just begun. We don't know what the ending to the story is. But either way, I'm super excited to see what happens.
I think it's in Ducati's best interest that Pecco wins the championship because it looks better when the factory guy wins it. And also, you have to explain to all the sponsors and to Audi that the money that went into the Ducati factory team did not materialize to win the championship. But all the pictures then, if Jorge Martin indeed will win the championship, then all the pictures, all the media attention will go to Pramac and Prima and the Pramac sponsor and all of this stuff and away from the factory team. So
Shout out
there's a lot
crypto data.
there's a lot of money involved at the end of the day, and you want to make your sponsors happy. And if Lenovo asks, so what the fuck am I investing here? I want to be the one who gets all the attention. You're the factory team. It's much better for Ducati to win the championship with their factory team. But I think the argument towards riders will be very, very difficult if it's Ducati versus Ducati to help one and maybe battle more another or whatever, you know. But yeah, it's a long way to go. It looks like Pecco is still the clear-cut favorite for the title, and I hope Jorge Martin makes it interesting. But I would like to switch gears to first KTM and then Marc Marquez. And regarding KTM, it looked again like they are the best of the rest, but you have like 8 Ducatis, and they're somehow in the middle of it. They're like at the level of Luca Marini at the moment, or like at the level of Joan Zarco at the moment. And it's a good thing that KTM is there, but they are not on the level of Pecco and they're not on the level of Jorge Martin at the moment. And it's a little bit weird because you have like Ducati who are very dominant, then you have KTM who's good, and then you have the Aprilia who is not working at the moment. I don't know what's going on with Aprilia. Then you have Honda and Yamaha, and if Aprilia is not working, then Honda and Yamaha is on strike. So I don't know what is going on with Honda, but KTM is in a good spot right now, but they still have a lot to improve. And to me, they're not championship contenders. It looks good that they're more or less consistent on the top, but they need more races like Jerez and less races like Sachsenring or less races like Mugello.
Yeah, KTM are actually in a very good spot at the moment because they're the trust busters of the MotoGP grid at the moment. They're the only thing that's breaking up all 8 Ducatis finishing 1 through 8. They're the only reason really. So they should be very proud of themselves because they've made a lot of progress, and Pit Beirer deserves a lot of credit for the work he's done. I really do think they've made excellent progress. As for Brad Binder and Jack Miller, look, they're not going to challenge for the title. I don't think they'll be anywhere near the title come the end of the year. But they're making it interesting. And realistically, when you consider how good the Ducati is, that's all you can ask for. You know, am I asking that Brad Binder goes to Assen and beats Pecco, Bagnaia and Jorge Martin? No, because I know that isn't going to happen. Both guys are too fast and they're too good. But am I asking if Brad Binder could get a podium, break up the Ducati domination, Jack Miller doing the same? Yeah, absolutely. Because they're very good at it. They're more than capable of doing it, and it makes it more interesting for everybody else. Because if Ducati start just locking out every podium every weekend, nobody's going to watch because we need exciting, interesting racing. And Brad Binder and Jack Miller are good enough that they're breaking up Grassini and the VR46 squad. Now, are they good enough to get in between Pramac? No, I don't think they are, is my honest opinion. But the other two Ducati teams, yeah, they're breaking it up. They're making it interesting. Realistically, it falls on Yamaha, Honda, and Aprilia to follow KTM and break up the Ducatis. Right now, KTM are doing the work of the other 3 teams besides themselves. And like I said, I think they deserve credit for that because we completely wrote them off at the beginning of this year. I wrote them off at the beginning of this year, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. And KTM are proving me wrong, and I hope they continue to do so.
Yeah. The thing that bums me out a little bit that Brad Binder was never going to beat Pecco on outright pace. This
Agreed.
was clear. I mean, Pecco is the fastest rider. We made a point for so long that Fabio is the best rider in the world right now. It gets extremely difficult to defend this position. And what Pecco is doing at the moment is incredible. And you see it compared with the other Ducatis. There are more or less no match for him. And it's absolutely incredible what he does on a motorcycle. And he is clearly the best rider in the world right now. And yeah, regarding KTM, Brad Binder and Jack Miller, they are never going to beat him on pace just in case they have, oh, no, try to say it differently. They
Mm-hmm.
are never going to beat him on outright pace except they have races like Jerez every race, and they don't. What KTM needs to do is be consistent, and if Pecco fucks it up, then reap the points and
Be
go back.
there.
Yeah, be there. And this is where KTM is struggling at the moment, um, especially Brad Binder, because he was notorious for being consistent. Jack Miller is in his first race, in his first season with KTM, and it's okay to have those learning experiences where he crashes and like in Le Mans, But from Brad Binder, I expect consistency like he always did, and he is bottling at the moment. That he crashed in Austin, he crashed now in Germany, which was unfortunate occurrence because it looked like he lost the rear and then there were no runoff areas, but he needs to stay on the bike and be consistent, and then he has a shot at Pecco over a whole season. But if he starts to be inconsistent as well, and it becomes a battle between an inconsistent Pecco and an inconsistent Brad Binder, there's no way in hell that he will compete for the championship at the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree, and that's a very good point to mention. I'm going to give Brad Binder a pass for today because he never crashes. He went out onto the curb and he high sided off of the curb, which very rarely ever happens. So I'm willing to give him a pass for today because he is always very, very consistent. But yeah, as it pertains to KTM, you make a very good point. Are they going to be there? In outright pace, they're just never going to be in that mix because the Ducati's too good. Where KTM have to be is where Fabio was in 2021 with the Yamaha. Be the opportunist, be there when the points are dropped and they're there to be picked up again. That's what you have to do to beat this Ducati because in outright pace, you're going to get eaten alive. It's too good, it's too quick, it's too strong. What you have to do is outthink the Ducati. You can't get into a fist fight with it because if you get into a fist fight with the Ducati, it's going to knock you out. You got to dance around it. You got to be clever. You got to pick up points where you can and basically jab at it, to use a MMA metaphor. So I think KTM are doing a good job of that at the moment. It's unfair to hold them to a standard because Yamaha and Honda have been nowhere near good enough. They've been exceptionally poor and they have not helped the other manufacturers tackle Ducati. KTM are fighting this fight on their own, and for what my expectations were of them at the beginning of the season, I'm exceptionally impressed with what they've done. So I give KTM credit because they've far exceeded my expectations on this.
Yes, that is correct. But KTM is there to win, and they're not winning at the moment.
But nobody else is, and that's just testament to Ducati.
Yeah, I mean, Ducati, with the exception of Alex Rins, they won every race.
Which is, I mean, just think about it.
So yeah, it's incredible what they're doing. It's the right direction compared to last year. But I mean, the Ducati is just something else. And especially like down the waterfall, it looked like it wasn't a KTM issue. It looked like it was a Jack Miller issue because
Mm,
Brad Binder was competitive there, but
yeah.
he was getting eaten alive in this corner. And I mean, what you want to do if three guys pass you in the same corner, then something's up.
Yeah, he kept losing half a second every single lap in the waterfall section. It was so strange. And I kept thinking to myself, is there a mechanical issue? Is there a lack of grip in the waterfall section? I don't know what it is. But like you said, and you're absolutely correct, it was just a Jack Miller issue because he was in sectors 1 and 2. He was doing great. He was doing really good. He was even getting a few overtakes here and there. But sector 3 coming into the waterfall section, he just kept getting passed by everybody. And I did think something was up, but I really don't know what's going on there. You would have to ask Jack Miller that. But interesting segue into Marc Marquez, because I know we got to get on and talk about that as well. What strikes me most about the Ducati is that Marc Marquez was in the sprint race, as we know. We know he loves the Sachsenring. He hasn't lost there since 2013 or even before that.
Or I believe like the last race he didn't won there was in the 125 cc class.
Exactly, and that's a world away now. And the point that I make with this is that he looked nowhere near winning that race. I mean, he finished around P10, P11
It
because the
was
Ducatis
P11.
just eat him alive, and that just tells you how good this Ducati is. With the exception of Alex Rins doing Alex Rins things at Coda, the Ducatis won every race.
Yeah. And I think Marc Marquez is in a position right now where he's over it. I mean, he tried and tried and tried and failed and failed and failed. And we all know how good of a rider he is. I
Oh,
mean, Marc Marquez, what he does with this Honda is incredible. And we see it with every other Honda rider. The bike is trying to injure you. And in the sprint race, it looked like he was over it. He just said, okay, I can't be competitive with this bike. There are riders who are taking significantly less risk and are significantly faster. So why am I doing this? It looks like that Mark is fed up with Honda. It looks like he's over it, and I don't know how, but it looks like he wants to go out immediately. But he has a contract until the end of next year, and this will make things interesting in the offseason if he can get out of his contract, and if he doesn't, what will happen then after the 2024 season. But it looks like he just gave up all hope because he realized if I can't win here, I cannot win anywhere.
yeah, I think Marc Marquez is just over Honda's bullshit at this point, and you can't blame him. I mean, look, I've never been Marc Marquez's biggest fan. I'm a Valentino Rossi fan, yada yada yada. We've discussed all this before. But you cannot deny the greatness of Marc Marquez and how one of one he is as a rider. In terms of pure talent, he might be the greatest person to ever step foot on a two-wheel motorcycle in MotoGP. He might well be that good. And realistically, ever since 2017, 2018, he's been riding a bike that nobody else could ride and nobody could even touch him on. We talked about this last episode. That RC213V has tried to kill Jorge Lorenzo and it retired him. It's tried to kill Alex Rins. It's broken his leg. Joan Mir has now got contusions and cuts all over his body because of that bike. Cal Crutchlow, I'm amazed he didn't die because it tried to kill him too. Nakagami, it's tried to kill as well. I mean, do I really need to go on telling you the hit list of the Honda? This bike is dangerous. It is dangerous. Marc Marquez is the only person who's ever been able to ride that bike, and now he can't ride it either. And we were always, I mean, sorry, I misspeak, not we. Honda was always willing to overlook the deficiencies in their bike as long as Mark kept winning because it didn't matter. They could throw away all the other riders. They could throw away Danny Pedrosa, Jorge Lorenzo, everybody else, Polo Spargaro. Everybody else was dispensable to Honda because Mark kept winning, because he was able to make this bike work. And then in 2020, the bike bit back. Mark got permanently destroyed in his right arm, and now he can't get it to work either. And Honda are in the worst position of anybody on the grid, and I'm going to tell you why. Yamaha have their problems, okay? That bike is a bag of dog shit. We know that. They can't get anything out of it, etc., etc. But Honda have a bike that is actively trying to hurt anybody who rides it, and that is a very dangerous prospect. Marc Marquez crashed 5 times this weekend. 5 times, and the fifth one fractured his thumb. And it got to a point where, like you said, and you're absolutely correct in what you said, Leo, it got to a point where he was like, screw this, I quit. I can't do this anymore. I can't take any more punishment. You know, Marc Marquez's injuries should have retired him 3 years ago. He should have retired in 2020. He was injured that badly, but he's come back and he still can't get that bike to work. And realistically, with the saves he's made, he should have crashed at least double digits this weekend. The fact that he's even in the position he's in is incredible, but Honda have to do something. They need to get a jerry can of petrol and set fire to that effing bike because it's trying to kill everybody who rides it. And what you're doing now is you're pushing away your ace. You're pushing away your best rider because he doesn't even want to ride that thing anymore. And you're going to be left at a point where you have 0 riders on the grid because nobody will be willing to ride it. And Honda have to get their act together and quick because Marc Marquez, right? Marc Marquez has a lot of money. He is going to find a lawyer or a group of lawyers who will try and get him out of his contract. Whether he can or not, I don't know. I don't know Marc Marquez's contract with HRC, but he is going to do everything within his power to get out of that contract. I think he might even retire to get out of his contract. That's how bad this is. Either way, Honda, you've got to sort your shit out because that bike is going to hurt somebody. It really is.
I mean, with Mark, I was a little bit fed up with him after the Zarco crash because I understand that he didn't went to Joan Zarco and checked on him because A, Joan Zarco was in a very dangerous position on the track,
Yeah.
and B, he's not a doctor. It's not his responsibility to look after Zarco. The marshals and the doctors are there for this kind of work. But to blame Joan Zarco for the crash, I mean, come on. Yes, the track in itself is incredibly stupid with the pit exit, and in my opinion, it shouldn't be a MotoGP track. But it's his responsibility if he's on track to not wipe out anybody. So
Correct.
he should have seen Joan Zarco, and I believe he saw Joan Zarco, and then make a calculated move where he doesn't crash. But then you had the crash in the qualifying where he high-sided in the last turn, which was also like a little bit reckless. He crashed into Marco Bezzecchi, but they both didn't crash. And he had this incredible high side in the warm-up, which brings us a little bit back to Indonesia, where he had this high side in the warm-up. Why do you need to push so hard in a warm-up session that you high side? But the flip side to this argument is, even if he's on a cool-down lap, the bike is trying to throw him off. It's like a bucking bull, and it's incredible. But I understand every bit that Mark seems to be fed up with Honda. He was declared fit to race today. He has a broken pinky, I believe. As
I
far
think it
as
was his thumb.
it could be like a finger, but to everybody, this is a serious injury. But he tried to race with a fucking broken arm. So motorcycle races are built different, and usually if a motorcycle racer is declared fit, he will race. We saw Jorge Lorenzo famously racing with a broken collarbone 2 days after breaking it, and if they are declared fit, they will race. And it shows that Mark kind of learned from the past, but also it shows that he sees zero hope and 0 sense to step on a Honda and compete on his best track where he never fucks up. I mean, shit was hitting the fan in 2021. He went there and won. And I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it looks like that this injury is not an injury where he couldn't race. It looks like Marc Marquez is on strike with Honda right now. And it looked the same after his injury in Portimao. There was, in my opinion, no reason. If this indeed was the injury, this broken, I mean, he had something in his hand, but it's not too bad, I believe. And if this is the only thing he had, and if they were telling us 100% of the truth, then it also looked like just a strike. And I don't know how long this relationship is sustainable.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I think we've reached the breaking point of this relationship between HRC and Marc Marquez. Because, like you said, and again, it's another really good point, this is the first time we've ever seen Mark be declared fit for a race, which he never should have been declared fit, by the way.
I mean,
MotoGP doctors, I
it's
don't
not
agree with.
it's not too bad of an injury. I mean, we saw a lot worse injuries. Remy rode with broken ribs to win his title. I mean,
Hmm.
I I certainly wouldn't want to ride with a broken finger, but in MotoGP terms, it's not a bad injury, and you can do this.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'll agree to disagree on that point, but the wider point that I'm making is this is the first time we've ever seen Mark throw his hands up and say enough's enough. And that is very telling, combined with the fact that he's gone on strike at the Sachsenring, which is his track. I mean, even though he's Spanish, it's his track. The Sachsenring is Marc Marquez's track. He is literally undefeated at the Sachsenring through the entirety of his motorcycle racing career. And the fact that he said, I mean, he obviously didn't say I quit, but the fact that in spirit he quit that race because he realized it wasn't worth it. If that doesn't tell you how bad this situation is, I don't know what more is going to. There's there just comes a point where you cannot do any more than what you're doing. And Marc Marquez went beyond that years ago, but now he's at a point where he literally can't do any more. And it's going to get to a point where he will just sit out parts of the season if that bike isn't rideable, and nobody will blame him. Like I said, like I said, Alex Rins has a severely broken leg because of that bike. Joan Mir has been constantly bit at and injured because of that bike. The only Honda now that is rideable is Taka Nakagami, and the bike's tried to kill him as well. You know, I'm kind of lost for words, Leo. I don't know what more I can say about this because we've said this so many times already, last season and this season, and Honda just are not getting it right.
Yeah.
I don't know what more I can say.
It started like in Mugello when he crashed and was standing in front of the bike, like, what is happening? I don't know. I am clueless. I can't do this anymore. Then we went to Germany and it looked like, okay, if this track can work, then we can build up confidence again. But even on this track where Honda is notoriously good, I mean, remember before Marc Marquez came there, Dani Pedrosa was winning all the races um, in Germany, and I believe the last time before the whole Marquez injury saga was in 2009 that a Honda rider didn't win it. Valentino Rossi won back then on the Yamaha, and I don't know if Casey Stoner won there, but Dani Pedrosa won a couple of races at the Sachsenring before Marc Marquez entered MotoGP. Then it was only Marquez, and then in 2022 was the first time because Marc was missing where he couldn't win. I mean, even um, with his fucked up arm in 2021, he won there, and Mark is like in a position right now where his best bet is to get out of this contract.
Yeah,
If he can't get out of his contract, his second best bet would be to retire,
yeah,
to heal up, and take 2024 to train, heal up, and come back in 2025 with a different manufacturer, because there is no point in fighting for P7 while the bike is trying to injure you, because we talked about this too much. Marc Marquez is one serious crash away from retirement, and not the good retirement I just mentioned. The
Yeah.
bad retirement where you are forced to retire because your body just can't do it anymore. And he's in risk, like every motorcycle racer is in a way, but he is in more risk to compromise his entire life because of this bike.
Yeah. And like Leo, I want to make a point here, and I want to make this very, very clear to everybody who's listening and watching. And I have to take this more extreme than you just have. Marc Marquez is not one big crash away from retirement, because that was Jerez in 2020. Marc Marquez is one bad crash away from death. And I'm being very, very serious when I say that. His body cannot take any more punishment. He is riding on fumes as it is. One more big crash is going to finish him. And I mean, the guy must be hanging together as it is. One more big crash is going to end him. And I'm being very, and I don't want that from Marc Marquez, because whether you love him or whether you hate him, Marc Marquez is brilliant for our sport. He's a brilliant, brilliant rider. He's a multi-time world champion, and he deserves his place. And I don't want to see an awful piece of machinery end all of that. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I don't want to see that. His best option at this point is to either try and get out of that contract if he can, or just retire and walk away, Mark. You have nothing to prove to anybody. You've nothing to prove to your critics. You have nothing to prove to your fans. If that bike is trying to kill you, and we said this already, and a lot of media said this, Sachsenring was the make or break. If Mark was even competitive this weekend, everybody was going to say, okay, there's a glimmer of hope. There's something we can work with. If you can't get it done at the Sachsenring, your home ground on this bike, then there's nothing left to fight for. Just pack it in and walk away, Mark, because the next big crash, I promise you, it'll be your last.
I mean, luckily we evolved into a place where riders usually don't die from a single crash. They unfortunately die from outside influences. Every crash kind of puts you in the situation to be hit by another rider, be hit by your bike, whatsoever. But to talk about death, I don't see it in motorcycle racing this in this day and age, except there are outside forces. Like if you have a crash and somebody hits the rider who crashed, or like Austria 2020 moment where a bike is just flying past Valentino, or like a Luis Salom situation or a Pol Espargaro situation where the bike and the air fence kind of land in the wrong place. But I don't see it in this day and age that he, if it's not from outside forces, that he dies, which is a very positive thing because we evolved out of this time. And there's always a little bit risk, but we minimize the risks significantly. And I mean, I can't remember the last time a rider in MotoGP died from not being hit by another rider. I don't know because I was too young how Di Giro Cato died back then, but like Marco Simoncelli, he was hit by another rider, and all these group crashes, they only happen in the lower classes because it's just too condensed there and it's too dangerous. But I think that Marc Marquez is one bad crash away from retirement, but to talk about death is, in my opinion, too much.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I hope it is too much, because I don't want it to happen to him. I'm at a point where it's gone beyond sort of, ridicule and humor and this and that. I'm at a point where as a fan and as a commentator, I am very concerned for Marc Marquez's health, because that man is fragile as it is, and he's on the worst bike in the grid that's trying to hurt him and throw him off. Now, yes, maybe death is extreme. I hope it is extreme. I don't want that to happen to him. But look, Wayne Rainey, we saw what happened to him. One crash paralyzed that poor man, unfortunately. Tajiro Kato, rest in peace. We saw what happened to him. Louis Salom, we saw what happened to him. Now, yes, those are outside influences, and I take your point in that. But what we've seen with Mark as well is that aside from his own crashes, he's now. I mean, how Johan Zarco wasn't affected by the front wheel being blown off his bike, I don't know. Miguel Oliveira was horribly injured as well at Portimao. We have to, it gets to a point where somebody has to step in and stop this. It's a bit like an MMA match where somebody's getting beaten up so badly, like Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson, for example. It gets to a point where someone's got to step in and stop this because Mark, I don't know if Mark has it in him to stop under his own power. Somebody needs to get him away from this because it's coming to a point where where one more crash at the very least is going to retire him.
I mean, his best bet, if he indeed wants to make a run at another title, is to retire and come back in 24 with a different manufacturer because there's no point in staying with Honda. Honda needs to look themselves in the mirror, in the eyes, and tell them that they need to build a new bike. And
Completely agree.
like we said, the Honda from outright pace is a better bike than Yamaha. I mean, Honda won a race, and Marc Marquez did some good things on the bike when he had the sprint races, but Yamaha doesn't try to hurt you. And we talked about this last time. I can tell you exactly why Joan Zarco wasn't injured because he's a fucking genius. You see it on the replay. He hears Marcus's bike, lifts up his legs, and then the bike hits his bike away from him, and he still landed on the back of his head, which looked extremely dangerous. But if he didn't lift up his legs, then I think his foot might have been broken, or his leg or whatsoever. So Joan Zarco is a genius for doing this, for being so experienced and being so aware. But yeah, Honda needs to do something because forget Marc Marquez for a second. What do you do if Alex Rins is injured, if Joan Mir is injured, if Taka Nakagami is injured? I mean, you can't run 3 Stefan Bradls, you know? It's not bearable at the moment to ride a Honda because it's too dangerous. It's okay to ride a Yamaha. You're slow. Okay, good luck with it. But Honda is too dangerous to be sustainable because you can't develop a bike if everybody's injured.
Yeah, exactly. And at the moment, the Honda is a bit like riding an IED or a roadside bomb. At some point, it's going to explode and it's going to try and do some damage to you. And look, for all the faults that Yamaha have, and they have many, 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 many faults, we know that. At least the Yamaha won't try and kill you. There's something that can be done with the Yamaha. It's salvageable. This Honda is not salvageable. This is the devil incarnate in a MotoGP bike. There is something with that bike, and I just don't think it can be fixed. You may as well just scrap it, write it off, and start again. Because, like you said, Alex Rins is screwed. His season's over because it broke his leg. Joan Mir's not going to want to ride it anymore because it's trying to kill him already. Nakagami's Nakagami, and Marc Marquez doesn't want to ride it either. And you made another really good point. You can't use 3 Stefan Bradls, and the only reason Bradl's riding it is because he's contracted as the test rider. If it was any other situation, he wouldn't even want to ride it. So, I mean, something's got to be done. Something
I
has to be
mean,
done.
regarding Bradl, I have my opinions too. They need to get rid of him
Yeah, I
because
agree.
when you are the test rider, you are responsible for developing the bike. And I mean, he's not an engineer. He's just a test rider, but he needs to make a better job of developing the bike, and Honda needs to have a better test rider.
Yeah,
Period.
they do.
Honda needs to hire some engineers who know something about aerodynamics because what they're doing is pathetic in comparison to Ducati, Aprilia, KTM. It's absolutely pathetic, and Yamaha as well. So Honda needs to do something quickly to make this bike rideable again, because it's not Marc Marquez pushing the thing over the limit. That's what he's always done. The thing is trying to buck him off when he's on a cooldown lap 3 seconds off the pace. I mean, he is in any situation in danger because everything can happen with the Honda and everything will happen with the Honda.
Yeah, completely right. And on the subject of the test rider, how they haven't picked this up already is disgraceful, quite frankly. But look at Ducati, Michele Pirro, brilliant, brilliant test rider, has done wonders with that bike. Danny Pedrosa, maybe the best test rider of them all. The work he's done at KTM is second to none, really, really good.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Dani Pedrosa, he was more or less retired by the Honda as well. It's
Yeah,
not like a
exactly.
23 Honda problem, it's a Honda problem. He always had injuries.
Yeah, at some point, the data doesn't lie. You know, we have a saying, what can't speak can't lie. And the Honda keeps retiring the people that try to ride it, which means it's a common problem. And it's the Honda. It ain't the people trying to ride it. Danny Pedrosa done an unbelievable job at KTM. When Suzuki was still in the paddock, Sylvain Gintoli worked wonders on that bike. He basically developed it by himself, and Suzuki listened to him. Now, let's have a look at the Japanese manufacturers and where they've gone wrong. Honda just got a crap test rider. Nobody seems to listen to anybody, and they're trying to just hodgepodge and throw things together to try and make this bike work. Yamaha brought in Jorge Lorenzo. He was too lazy to test ride. He didn't want to ride the fucking thing. And now they've got Cal Crutchlow, and he doesn't seem to have inputted anything into it either. You know, at some point, the development of the project has to start with somebody who knows what they're doing. And why Honda let Danny Pedrosa walk, I don't think I'll ever understand why they allowed him to do that. But they need to get better people into work on these bikes because they are so substandard that it's unreal. And I actually think we are at a point where you could put a good world superbike bike into the MotoGP grid on any given race, and they would beat the Yamaha and the Honda based on how they've been performing because it is so poor.
Like Ducati Superbike painted in Repsol Honda colors.
Let Alvaro Bautista race.
Uh, um, I mean, Yamaha is pathetic as well. Yes, Aprilia, I don't know what the fuck's going on there. Maverick had a catastrophic weekend. And also, Aleix Espargaro, the thing is not able to stop properly. It's bad off the line, and I don't know what Aprilia is doing right at the moment because it looks like they have all the tools to win, but they're just underperforming, and I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, I would like to talk to you a little bit about Moto 2 because Pedro won, but it wasn't a necessarily spectacular race. I put all my hopes into Jack Dixon to overtake Tony Apollino, and I should have known better because it's Jack Dixon at the end of the day. What the fuck am I expecting? um, Aroncan had binned it, but not too much happened in Moto 2. It was a super boring race, but we see that Pedro is the better rider than Tony Abolino. He is on outright pace much better. Tony Abolino is just more consistent. He is able to pick up points in the rain. He wins rain races, and he is able to not crash. And Pedro needs to be more consistent. I guess he knows that. But what he's doing is so spectacular. Tony Abolino is a very good rider, but Pedro Acosta is on another level. He is so incredibly fast, and I really hope that he will go to Ducati.
Yeah, I mean Pedro is just superhuman. He really is. This kid's skill and ability is so far ahead of what it should be at his age. You know, if any other rider was Pedro Acosta at 18 in his situation, they should still be in Moto 3, you know, learning and developing and getting experience. This kid is a world champion in Moto 3 and arguably the toughest class to win a title. He's gone up to Moto 2. He's bossing it there as well. I mean, this kid is just spectacularly good. And I know we love memeing about him because we love Lord Pedro Acosta. Of course we do. But God, he is a good rider. He is so far ahead of his years that it's not even funny anymore. He is just spectacular. I think today was the first pole that he's ever converted in Moto 2, where he qualified on pole and ended up winning the race as
I
well.
mean, definitely this season, but
Yeah,
last year I can't remember.
yeah, I think in Moto 2, definitely this is the case. But I mean, Antonio Arbolino, like you said, he is a great, great rider, and Pedro made it look easy. And what you're seeing with Pedro is just once in a generation talent. You really, really are. Because look, the grid's full of great riders. You have to be a great rider to be there. But I don't think really since Marc Marquez, we've seen a youngster come into the class and take it by storm the way Pedro Acosta has. And yeah, it was a boring race, actually. Not a great deal happened apart from Aaron Canet binning it yet again. But Pedro Acosta is just supernatural, man.
Yeah. And you have to compare him to like Izan Guevara. They came into the World Championship in the same year. Izan won the Spanish Championship or the Junior GP, and Pedro won the Rookies Cup. He went on to win the Moto 3 title in his first year. Izan took a while and now won this thing in his second year. Now Izan is in his first season in Moto 2, and Pedro's first season in Moto 2 wasn't great, particularly the first few races. But then in Le Mans, he was leading, unfortunately crashed. But in Mugello, he was very, very good. And you don't see this from Izan Guevara. And that shows you, I'm not trying to talk shit about Izan. He's a young man and he needs to learn a lot. I think it just shows how good Pedro is and what kind of talent he is. Because remember what Izan did last season. He is so incredibly good, but for some reason it doesn't work for him right now. And to come into a class and be competitive after a couple of races and to win like a sixth race in Mugello last year is incredible. What Pedro is doing is he's the best rider or the best talent since Marc Marquez. I mean, it's a totally different world now from back then, but what Pedro did was absolutely incredible, and what he is continuing to do is absolutely incredible. And from a rider's perspective, from a talent perspective, he can do everything if he has the right partner in MotoGP.
Yeah, completely agree. And I would argue that the ascendancy and the rise of Pedro Acosta is just as impressive, if not more so, than Marc Marquez's. And the reason I say that is that the competitiveness of Moto 2 and Moto 3 in this generation is so competitive. I mean, Moto 3, 50% of the grid could win the race every single weekend. It is that competitive. Moto
Only one can win it from the pit lane.
Only one can win from pit lane. I mean, I don't think even Marc Marquez has ever done that, and Pedro
He did
Acosta
it.
did.
He did it in Germany, but everybody was starting from the pit lane, so
So,
it's different.
yeah, I mean, that doesn't really count, does it? Because everybody was in the same boat. But Pedro Acosta, he's so gifted. He really is so gifted. And I really think when you look at Pedro Acosta, I know this isn't breaking news, but when you look at Pedro Acosta, you are looking at the next big thing. You are looking at the best talent since Marc Marquez. And the reason I say that is because there's no evidence to argue against it. I mean, if you can think of someone, let me know. But I think you're going to be waiting for a long time to find that person because the person doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Pedro Acosta is a generational talent.
Yeah. I mean, after last season, you could argue like that Izan was more or less the same, just needed 1 year. But now in Moto 2, it just shows that Pedro is just continuing to be great. And Izan has like normal learning curves. It's not a bad thing what Izan is doing at the moment. And I think he will be good in the future. But Pedro is just on another level. And when you compare like Fabio's career, he was good in Junior GP, but then in Moto 3 he didn't win, in Moto 2 he didn't win, and then in MotoGP he just came into his own. Pecco was okayish in Moto 3. He had the Mahindra, which wasn't the best bike at the time. Came to Moto 2, dominated, and then went to MotoGP. And I mean, Marc Marquez, yes, he is absolutely incredible, but there is not much between them in terms of talent, and it's absolutely incredible what Pedro is doing, and I'm very excited to see what he will do in MotoGP. I hope next season.
Yes, so am I. And I think if you get, because we talked about this extensively in the last episode, as you all will remember, if you get Pedro Acosta on a Ducati, I think it's world championship. I'm just saying that here and now. I think if you get a kid that rides that well on a bike that good, I think he could compete with Pecco Bagnaia just based on talent alone. I think you are looking at a serious, serious threat to Pecco Bagnaia. Generational talent on the best bike. Who doesn't want to watch that? Because I want to watch it. I know you want to watch it,
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure the people want to watch it too.
and I want to watch the MotoGP rule change in 2027 because, yeah, with the wings and ride height device today, we had a great race, but you saw them impacting the race, and I would like to get rid of them sooner than later, but 27 seems to be the year.
Yeah.
And yeah, until 27, a lot can change. And my prediction is that in 27, a new manufacturer will join with the new rules, and that Dorna is trying to work something out behind the scenes now to give them enough time to prepare and so on, make a rule set for 2027 that they can prepare themselves on entering. Yeah, but just a prediction, who knows?
Yeah, and look, Ducati are not going to be bothered by 2027, and I'm going to tell you why. Ducati have proved their ability to work on the bike and to work the way around problems. Gigi Dall'Igna is a genius because he's really spearheaded that project, and his engineering development on that bike is truly second to none. If you don't think Ducati are already working on alternatives to life without the ride height device, then you're a fool because Ducati were able to do the best ride height device. They will do the best bike without one as well. This won't bother them one bit. But do you know who it is going to bother? Every other manufacturer who are so far behind Ducati that they'll still be playing catch up in 2027 as well. So I'm excited to see 2027 because I think it'll be interesting, but I don't see a whole lot changing.
Yeah. And in Moto 3, the impossible happened. All hell froze. Easter and Christmas was on the same day, and Denit Öncü won a race. Absolutely incredible. And it has been a great time to make Denit Öncü memes about not winning. It was fun, and yeah, now we have to just stick to Joan Zarco and Aaron Canet for it.
Yeah.
And he left this dynamic trio. Now they're just a dynamic duo. And the way he did it was also incredible. He deserved every bit of it. And yeah, I'm actually very happy for him because he just deserves it. And the way he was hindered by his height, by sometimes his antics whatsoever in the past, it just was a long, long way coming because he is good.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say the Jurassic Park meme might be my favorite meme of the weekend. You know, you did it, you crazy son of a bitch, you did it. Yeah, I'm very happy for Dennis Öncü because aside from being, I know a lot of people branded him like the Turkish terrorist, which was really, really funny. He's a very good rider. Underneath all the stupidity and the craziness and the hot headedness, there's a really good rider underneath all of that. And I think for the first time this weekend, you actually saw that. And like you said, the way he rode, he completely deserved his win today because he rode a lot better than I think I've ever seen him ride. And I'm very happy for Dennis Öncü. But what he has to do now is he has to build on this. This is the platform that he builds on for the rest of the season. He's got the first win out of the way. Now it's on to many, many more. Don't let yourself set back based on this. Go forward, push forward for the other wins. And maybe I won't look like a complete retard when we do our end of season review. So, Dennis Öncü, I'm counting on you.
Yeah, I mean, it was never a question of talent. It was a question of his height and his weight, and
Yeah,
also a question of his hot-headedness. How do you say?
hot
Uh,
headedness.
hot-headedness, yeah. And he got that under control, and I think Aki Ayo made a good job because, like, in Mugello, he was so far ahead of everybody
Oh,
else. And now Ayumu Sasaki had a second over everybody in qualifying. Ayumu Sasaki was so fast on this track, but Denit Öncü made everything, did everything right. He had the pace. He wasn't too eager to get on with it. He didn't make any mistakes. He just prepared his overtake perfectly, and that shows again that Ayumu Sasaki is not as sophisticated as Jorge Martin, obviously, but he will learn from it. He has a great race, great future, and Denit Öncü, I think, in Moto 2 will be somebody to watch because I personally think that he will go to Aki Ayo, and that's the reason for this move. Because otherwise, I don't see a reason for him and Daniel Algado to change. Because Daniel Algado, Junior GP champion, had a very good rookie season. He did everything to keep his seat, but they changed it. I can only think of them wanting to move Denit Öncü over, and they did not anticipate that Daniel Algado will be so good.
mm.
But it could very well be that both move up to IO next season because Pedro doesn't want to stay in MotoGP and in Moto2, I'm sorry. And Albert Arenas is doing everything he can to lose his seat at IO because if Aki Ayo can fix you, then who can?
Exactly. Yeah, you make a really good point. I think the move for KTM is move Pedro Acosta up to MotoGP because you
For
cannot
who?
lose him. You
For who?
can't. Sorry?
For who do you move him?
Leo, that's why they get paid and I don't. That's on them to think. But if you're KTM, the move has to be moving Pedro up and then bringing Dennis Öncü to Moto 2. I think that's what you have to do. Because like you said, we've seen riders with this issue before, most notably Danilo Petrucci, who it's not necessarily an issue of weight necessarily, but it is an issue of height. There's a lot of riders who are just bigger than other riders. Like I myself, I'm very tall. I would struggle massively in a Moto 3 bike. Get these riders up, promote them, let them do their thing on a bigger bike, and you will reap the rewards of it. Like I said, as with Pedro Acosta and MotoGP, that's on them to figure out. I don't want to be involved anywhere near that discussion. But yeah, Dennis Öncü, I'm very, very happy for him. Happy he got his first win. But like I said, it's all about progression and building from here and building and building and building. You've got very good momentum now. Use that going into Assen after the summer break. Keep building on it because you don't want to lose that kind of momentum. It's very hard to come by. You've got it now. Don't waste it.
Yeah, I'm excited about Assen because I
Oh, I'm
think
very
that
excited. I love Assen.
Assen is a very, very interesting track. Pecco won there last year, but also Jorge Martin is very fast around these fast corners, and Assen has a lot of them. Also, it's notoriously a good track for Yamaha, so I'm excited to see what Fabio can do. And Maverick Vinales always has been good around Assen, so let's see what he can do. And yeah, I mean, Assen is also a track where I don't think it fits modern MotoGP anymore, but I'll accept it because of its tradition. And yeah, I'm very excited to see what's going on there.
Yeah, I'm really. I mean, I like I said, I love Aston anyway. I mean, crowd issues aside, we discussed those last year. The track itself, I bloody love. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful track, and I really enjoy MotoGP going there. But like you said, it's very interesting because it is notoriously pro Yamaha. It's a very flat, even, smooth track, and Yamaha's generally just fall in love with that track. The problem is the Yamaha's so bad this year. I don't think Jesus himself could get that bike to go around it and win. But
I mean,
that's the
ask Pedro, put Pedro on the thing next year and find out.
yeah. I mean, I think Pedro could. I think he could. I mean, look, whoever Pedro goes to, he's going to be the ultimate asset to have at your team because you're going to build a project around him for the next 10, 15 years of his career. Um, but yeah, as for Yamaha, I'm excited to see because they have to win at some point. You know, they got to get something from somewhere, and if it's not going to be Assen, it's a bit like Sachsenring with Honda. Assen is Yamaha. If you can't get anything out of Assen, then it truly is game over for you. Ducati have been so unbeatable that they will be the favourites. But you've also got Maverick Vinales, who historically has been very, very good around Assen, but his Aprilia broke down on him. You know, don't want to peddle any Italian stereotypes about reliability, but it broke down on him. You know, I'm really excited to see Assen, and I'm very curious to see how things go.
I'm curious if Yamaha gets concession points next year.
That's interesting.
I mean, Fabio has one podium, but they sure could need it.
Yeah, that's I didn't even think of concession points. That's a very, very interesting point.
Yeah, I'm going to find this out as well. Okay, I guess we're done here. See you in a week, and I had a lot of fun talking to you. Thanks everybody for listening, and we will see each other in a week. Goodbye, Keelan.
Great. Goodbye, Leo. Goodbye, everybody else. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed Saxon Ring as much as we did. I look forward to seeing you all at the Dutch TT.